Velara ran through the forest with her child held tight against her chest. The ground beneath her feet was cold and wet. Branches scratched her arms as she pushed forward. She had no direction. Only one thought kept her moving: protect Ilya behind. Then the forest burned. The sky was painted in orange fire. Drums of war thundered in the distance, and the sound of angry voices grew louder with every breath. Ilya clung to her mother's shoulders, her small face buried against Velara's neck. She did not cry. She was too scared for tears. Velara's heart pounded in her chest like a hammer. She could taste blood in her mouth, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop, because if she stopped now, they would be caught, and there would be no mercy. The forest was cursed by her people. They said the ground here swallowed the dead. They said nothing lived here, nothing kind, nothing safe. But still Velara chose the forest, because the fire behind her was worse than the shadows ahead. She tripped. Once caught herself on her elbow. Her knees scraped against stone. She looked back. No one yet. But they would come. A sharp crack echoed from behind, then another, and Anather. Velara's instincts screamed. She ducked and turned. She wrapped her arms around Ilya's tiny body. Then she saw an arrow spinning through the air, coming straight for them. Time slowed. The forest held its breath. Velara moved without thought. She shifted her body and put herself in front of the arrow. There was no pain at first, only impact. Then warmth. She stumbled. Her legs gave up. Her body dropped to the ground like stone. Ilya screamed. Velara tried to speak, but her mouth could not form words. Her vision blurred. The trees above became shapes. The light faded. Then footsteps, not the fast stomps of soldiers, but something slower, careful. A shadow stepped into view. Tall, broad, not alien, not one of her own. Human. Her body froze. She wanted to fight, but she had no strength. The human dropped to one knee beside her. His hands moved fast, checking the wound. His eyes flicked to the girl, then to the arrow, then back to Velara. Lifted her like she weighed nothing. Ilya cried out, but the human pulled her close too. He whispered something, not in her language, but calm. Softy ran into the woods, deeper than she had ever dared to go. The cold wind bit against her skin. Dark trees passed above, but Velara felt nothing, only her child's breath on her arm, and the warmth of blood soaking through her clothes. She drifted into darkness. When she opened her eyes again, she was lying on a floor of stone. Old metal beams curved above her, a ceiling. Lights flickered weakly. She tried to sit, but pain held her down. The human knelt beside her. He didn't speak. He only placed water to her lips. She saw Ilya asleep beside her, safe, wrapped in a blanket that wasn't theirs. Vile watched the human with tired eyes. His face was sharp, his jaw strong, but there was something strange, something gentle in his eyes. He brought her more water. He gave her a thin broth that burned her throat but warmed her chest. He didn't ask questions. He didn't chain her. He didn't even touch the weapon on his back. He just sat silent, like a wall between her and the chaos outside. Velara did not trust him. How could she? His kind brought fire to her world. They lied, they burned, they took everything. But then she looked at Ilya, sleeping peacefully, breathing softly. Velara looked at the human again. He was watching the door, hand resting on his knee, muscles tense, ready. He wasn't their enemy, not yet. Outside the bunker, the war still raged. But inside this space, there was something different, a quiet, a stillness. She wanted to speak, to ask his name, to ask why. Why would a human risk his life for them? But her throat could not carry words yet. So she watched, and he stayed. No questions, no promises, only presence. And in that quiet moment, lying on a cold floor, her daughter safe, her body broken, Vela felt something new. Not trust, not yet, but hope. And in a world where everything had been stolen, that hope was more powerful than any weapon. Because maybe, just maybe, this human was different, and maybe he had not saved them by chance. Maybe fate had sent him for something far greater than any of them knew yet. She closed her eyes again, not in fear, not in pain, but in peace. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she could rest, because someone was watching over them. Not a soldier, not a monster, but a human who had seen her fall, and chose not to walk away. He chose to run toward the danger. He chose to lift her and carry her through the shadows. That choice would change everything for her, for Ilya, and maybe for the entire world. The air inside the bunker was cold. Rust covered the walls. Old machines hummed in the corners like tired ghosts. And the only light came from a flickering lamp placed beside a sleeping child. Velera opened her eyes slowly. Her body ached in places. She could no longer feel, but it wasn't the pain that caught her attention. It was the silence. No screams, no burning, no drums of war. Only the soft breathing of her daughter, and something else. Footsteps. Careful, measured. She turned her head. The human was there, kneeling near a metal box. He opened it and pulled out a long strip of fabric, clean white. Velara's eyes followed his movements. His hands moved fast, but not rough. He wasn't scared. He wasn't angry. He walked to her side, held the bandage in one hand, and with the other gently touched her shoulder. He said something in his language, words she didn't understand, but the tone was calm, like water sliding over stone. Velera winced as he touched the wound. Her breath caught, her fists clenched. But he didn't stop. He worked quickly, wrapping her side with clean hands. His eyes never left hers, like he was watching for signs of fear, of trust, of anything. She wanted to speak, to ask his name, to ask why he was helping, but her voice refused to come. Then a sound, soft, high, tiny footsteps. Ilya appeared from behind the old control panel. She held a small glowing cube in her hands. A toy, or maybe something she had found among the scrap. The child walked up to the human and tugged his sleeve. He looked down. His face softened instantly. He smiled, not wide, but honest. He took the cube, turned it over, and with a single click, lit it up in a swirl of colors. Ilya's eyes lit up. She giggled. For the first time in days, she laughed. At Vela's heart clenched. The sound was too pure, too soft for a world like this. The human handed the cube back and looked at Velera again. Still silent, still calm. He stood, walked to a panel near the door, pressed a few buttons. The screen blinked, showing the forest above empty. For now he placed a piece of dried food on a metal plate and slid it near her. Velera didn't move, but Ilya crawled over and picked up a piece. She smelled it, bit it, then looked at her mother with big eyes. It was safe. It was food. It was kindness. Vela closed her eyes again, not from weakness, but from something else, from the weight of a question growing in her mind. Who was this man, and why would he help her when everyone else wanted her kind gone? Her people told stories of humans, of cities in the sky, of ships with weapons that could erase mountains of lies and war and betrayal. But this man, with his quiet hands and his sharp eyes, did not match those stories. He moved like a soldier, watched like a hunter, but cared like a father. That night, after Ilya fell asleep on a pile of old blankets, Velera sat up slowly. The pain still burned, but the fire in her blood had cooled. She watched the human as he worked. He cleaned the floor, sharpened a blade, checked a radio that didn't work. Then he looked at her, not in fear, not in pity, but in understanding. He pulled out something from his pocket, a worn picture, faded and torn. It showed a girl, human, smiling eyes, bright hair, tied with blue string. He pointed at the picture, then pointed at himself, then placed a hand over his heart. Velera understood not the words, but the meaning. He had lost someone too. The fire that had burned her world had taken from him as well. They were enemies on paper, but in this place, in this silence, they were something else. Not friends, not yet, but survivors, connected by pain, by loss, by the unspoken promise to protect the little ones who still live. At Velera looked at her daughter, then at the human, and for the first time since the war began, she didn't feel completely alone. She nodded once, barely, but enough. The human nodded back, then turned off the lamp and sat with his back to the door, weapon beside him, eyes open, guarding them all night. He did not sleep, and in the silence of that bunker, under the weight of the past, a seed was planted, not of love, not yet, but of something deeper, something that might one day grow into trust, because sometimes in the darkest places, the brightest lights are born from strangers, and sometimes the fire in a man's hands can protect instead of destroy. Valara stared at the bunker ceiling. Sleep refused to come, not because of pain, but because of memory. Outside, the world was silent. Inside her heart was not. Ilya slept beside her, one tiny hand resting on her mother's arm. The human, still nameless. Sat by the door, head lowered, not asleep, not relaxed, just waiting, always watching. Warmth of the bunker could not erase the cold inside her chest. The kind of cold that does not come from wind or rain, but from loss, from remembering what came. Before the fires, before the screams, before everything was taken, Valara's people were once a peaceful race, tall, silver-skinned, born with light inside them. They called themselves the Alari. They lived among rivers and glowing mountains. They sang songs that shaped the stones and built homes not with tools, but with harmony. They welcomed the humans when the first ship landed, brought gifts, offered shelter, believed in peace. But peace is fragile, and humans, they wanted more. At first the humans asked, then they demanded. Then they took the mountains, the crystals, the sacred tree of Valara's village, tried to resist quietly, softly. But resistance, even when peaceful, is always seen as a threat. She remembered the day her skies turned black. Day fire fell from above. The day her daughter stopped laughing. Her mate, tall and kind, was taken from her in the first attack. He had no weapon, only words, but words could not stop bullets. She ran with Ilya through ash and blood, through silence and ruin. For months she hid in the deep caves, feeding her child scraps, sleeping with one eye open, till they were found. Again, always found. Ones who hunted them were not just soldiers. They were called cleaners, men trained not to fight, but to erase, to leave no trace of the old world. And yet through all this, she survived, not because she was strong, but because Ilya needed her now. Lying in the bunker of a human, Valara began to wonder something dangerous. Was this man different, or was this just another layer of the same trap? She watched him as he moved. He never pointed a weapon at her, never raised his voice. He didn't try to control her, didn't even ask for trust. Just stayed, helped watch the door in the morning. He gave Ilya a piece of sweet fruit. Valara didn't know where he got it, but Ilya's smile was enough. Later, he picked up a small device, pressed a few buttons. Static crackled, then a voice, faint and distant. Valara tensed. She didn't understand the words, but the tone was clear. Orders, coordinates, a search. She stepped back, pulled Ilya behind her. The human noticed. He turned off the device, held up his hands, and slowly placed the machine on the floor. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small pendant. It was metal, old, worn with time. He pressed a button on the side. A blue light glowed, and a recording played. A child's voice, laughing, calling him father. Valara stared, her breath caught. This human had lost something too. Someone. He let the recording play, then clicked it off. No words, just truth shared in silence. Valara didn't speak, but her posture shifted, not relaxed, but less rigid. He understood. He had lost. He had run. He had chosen to walk away from the fire. Just like her that night, Valara sang a song to Ilya. An old lullaby, soft, broken by tears. She didn't let fall. The human sat with his back to them, but he listened. She saw his shoulders rise, then fall. A slow breath, a heavy heart. Two survivors, two paths, now crossing in a place built by metal and scars. They didn't choose the war, but it had chosen them. And somehow in this forgotten place, among wires and broken machines, they had found something that didn't belong in war. A quiet moment of almost peace. The forest above the bunker stayed quiet, but Valara knew silence was not safety. It only meant the next danger had not yet arrived. She woke early. Before Ilya, before the human, she moved slowly, carefully, testing her leg. Her side still burned, but she could walk. The bunker's walls were cold, every pipe groaned with age, and somewhere behind the metal water dripped in slow rhythm. She found a piece of old glass, looked at her reflection. Her skin was pale, her hair tangled, her eyes tired, older than they should be, but she was alive. Ilya was alive, and for now that was everything. She turned to check on her daughter, still curled beneath a thin sheet, her small hands holding the glowing cube. The human gave her. Valara walked toward the corner Of the room there lay a black bag, thick fabric, heavy straps. The human's bag. She hesitated, then knelt beside it, unzipped it just enough to peek inside. Clothes, rations, a water purifier, small tools, and then a weapon. Her breath stopped. It was sleek, dark gray, polished with care. Not a machine of war, a personal weapon, the kind carried by elite units. Her pulse quickened. Was this who he truly was? A soldier? A spy? A man sent to trick her? She reached for the weapon, paused. Her fingers shook behind her. A sound, not a threat, not an order, just his voice, soft, low, untranslated, but steady. She turned. The human stood by the wall, arms down, no anger in his eyes, no surprise, only calm. He walked forward, slow steps, then dropped to one knee, not close, just near enough to open his hand. In his palm, a broken metal badge, a symbol she recognized from the ships, from the men who burned her home. Her stomach turned, but then he pointed at it, then shook his head no. He placed it on the ground, crushed it under his boot. Valara watched, frozen between fear and confusion. He knelt again, opened his coat, pulled out a small patch cloth, old, torn, but on it a single mark, not a military symbol, not from Earth, but a sign used by deserters, by those who walked away from orders, from violence. Avella knew that mark. Her people had seen it once before. A man who warned them before the first wave. That man died, but his warning saved lives. She looked at the human now, and something shifted. Her breath slowed, her fingers uncurled, and she placed the weapon back inside the bag. Not because she trusted him, not yet, but because something inside her, some instinct, said he had chosen this path. Not forced, not ordered, a choice to protect, not destroy. Later that day, he taught Ilya how to boil water, how to use a filter tube, how to watch for footprints on soft soil. Valara watched them from the corner, not speaking, not interrupting. Ilya laughed once, a bright sound in the dark room, and Valara, without realizing, smiled. That night, she sat near the door while the human fixed a cracked pipe. They did not speak, but the silence felt different, less like a wall, more like a shared fire. He handed her a small box, inside a folded cloth, clean, and on it a drawing. It was crude, made with charcoal, but clear enough to see. 3 figures, a woman, a child, and a man standing under a tree, holding hands. Valara stared at it, her eyes heavy, but not from pain. He had drawn her, Ilya, and himself, not as warriors, not as enemies, but as something closer, a family. She didn't react, didn't speak, but when she handed the drawing back, she looked into his eyes and nodded once. He didn't smile, but something in his expression soft. That night, for the first time, Valara slept without clutching a weapon, because trust doesn't come easy, but it had begun, and once it begins, it cannot be stopped. The wind howled outside. The bunker branches cracked in the distance, the kind of sounds Valara had learned to fear. But inside, the bunker felt still, too still. The human paced quietly near the steel door. His eyes scanned the monitor, every flicker of static, every shadow in the trees above. Valara sat beside Ilya, gently braiding her hair. Her fingers moved with care, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Something had changed in the air. The forest was never safe, but tonight, it felt like it was watching. Monitor blinked again. A figure moved between trees. Then 2, then 3. Valara froze. Her breath caught. The human stepped forward, tapped a button. The image zoomed. Uniforms, weapons, clean faces, polished boots. They were not wanderers. They were soldiers, and one of them spoke into a com. Valara could not understand the words, but she didn't need to. Their eyes said everything. They were hunting. The human turned quickly, grabbed his gear, opened a hidden panel in the wall, revealed a narrow passage, a tunnel. He pointed at Valara, then at Ilya, then to the tunnel. Valara hesitated. Her instincts screamed, run, hide, protect, but she looked at his face. Not panic, not fear, just certainty. She picked up Ilya, held her tight, and followed his lead. The tunnel was cold, wet, barely wide enough to crawl. Valara felt every heartbeat, every breath echo through her chest. Behind them, above them, the bunker door creaked open. Heavy boots slammed against the floor. Voices filled the space they had just left. Questions, demands. Shouting. The human stayed above, not with them, He did not run. Valara stopped in the tunnel, turned. Her heart burned. What was he doing? Why stay then? Gunfire, short bursts. Metal on metal, shouts turned to screams. Then silence. Valara wanted to move, but her body refused. Delia clung to her, shaking. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Then a whisper from behind the human covered in ash. A cut across his cheek, one shoulder bleeding, but he was there. He made it. Valara reached for him without thinking, touched his arm. Not to pull, not to ask, just to feel if he was real. He nodded once, then led them deeper into the tunnel. They stopped at a second chamber, smaller, darker, but safe. For now the human sat down, removed his coat. Valara stepped forward, ripped a strip from her own tunic, pressed it to his wound. He winced but did not move away. She worked in silence, wrapping the cloth, tying it tight. Her hands did not shake this time. Ilya sat close, watching, quiet, understanding more than a child should when it was done. Valara sat beside him. She spoke softly, her first words in days. Why didn't you run? He didn't answer right away. He just reached into his coat, pulled out the same pendant, the one with the girl's voice, pressed it once. Father, a laugh, a whisper, a memory. Looked at Ilya, then at Valerand. Finally he spoke, because no one saved her. But I can save you. Valara felt something break inside her, and something stronger take its place. He had chosen them, over orders, over safety, over everything. And in that moment, he was no longer just a stranger. No longer just a man with a gun. He was something more, a protector. A wall between them and the fire, and maybe, just maybe, something even deeper than that. The storm outside had passed, but inside the hidden chamber, the air still trembled. Vela sat close to the human, her fingers stained with his blood, but her hands were steady. Ilya lay between them, curled in her blanket, sleeping safe. Valara watched the man. His eyes were closed, but he was not resting. His breath was slow, his face still tense, like his body could not forget the danger. Even when it had passed, she reached out. Not to heal, not to ask, just to feel. Her fingers brushed his arm. Warm, rough, strong. He opened his eyes, met hers. Neither of them spoke. There were no words for this, not in her language, not in his, but something passed between them, like a thread pulled tight across the silence. Not fear, not confusion, something deeper. She thought of her mate, the one she lost, the one who sang to Ilya before sleep, the one who promised to keep them safe. He was gone. But this human, this stranger, had risked everything without promise, without duty, without asking anything in return. Valara looked down at the cloth wrapped around his wound, at the hand he placed over Ilya's shoulder, at the quiet breath he took to stay awake. Even now, even broken, she stood, moved to the corner, found a small burner. He had shown her how to use it. She warmed a metal cup of water, crushed dried leaves between her fingers, dropped them in, waited. When the scent filled the air, soft and bitter, she brought the cup to him. He looked surprised, but took it, sipped slowly, then met her eyes again, nodded once. Thank you. Not in words, but in something older, something more honest. They sat together back against the same wall, a fire low between them, crackling from scavenged wood and weirs. Valara leaned her head back, closed her eyes, listened to Ilya's soft breathing, and the quiet hum of machines around them. Then he spoke, his voice low, rough, but steady. He told her about Earth, about a city with buildings that reached the sky, about a daughter who danced in the rain, about the day he lost her, and how the sound of her laughter still echoed in his ears. Even now Valara listened, not with pity, but with something that felt like reflection, like her soul leaning toward his without movement. She spoke next. She told him about the river where Ilya was born, the silver trees, the song her mate sang when Ilya opened her eyes for the first time. He did not interrupt. He just listened, and when her voice broke, he handed her the rest of the tea that night. There were no guards posted, no watches taken. They simply sat together. In the heat of the fire, in the quiet of a war, they had both walked away from Ilya, stirred once in her sleep, reached out, her hand touched his coat, and stayed there. He looked at her, then at Valeran. She did not move her hand away, not this time, because the fire inside her, the one built from fear, from pain, from endless running, was beginning to change. It was softer now, warmer, not a fire of destruction, but a fire of healing. She did not know what tomorrow would bring. The war was not over. The soldiers would return. The forest still watched, but in this moment, under broken stone and starlight, she knew one thing for certain: she no longer walked alone, and whatever came next, they would face it together. Morning came without warning. A soft blue glow filled the cracks in the wall. The forest outside was quiet again, but not still. Valara opened her eyes slowly. Her arm was wrapped around Ilya, the child's breath warm against her chest, safe still. Safe across from her, the human slept, sitting upright, head resting back. One hand still holding the broken pendant. Valara stood without a sound, her legs steady now, her wound healing. But something else had changed inside her. She no longer looked at him as a stranger, not even as a protector. He was more than that. Now he had become part of her world, part of her survival, and more than that, part of her heart. She stepped outside the hidden chamber into the forest's edge. The air was thick with mist. Sunlight slipped through the trees in golden beams. She heard a sound, a soft echo movement in the distance. Not enemy, not yet. But something was coming. She returned quickly, woken with a single touch. He blinked, eyes sharp but calm. They packed. Silently, Valara wrapped Ilya in her arms, and the three moved together through the tunnel. They reached the exit near the cliffs. Below them, a vast open valley, one of the last unburned places left. He pulled out a map, pointed toward the mountains. Beyond the tree line marked a small circly signal station, old, abandoned, but powerful enough to call the right people. If anyone was left who still listened, Valara nodded. They began. The walk. Hours passed. The path was steep, the wind sharp. But they kept moving. When Ilya grew tired, he carried her. No words, no complaint, like she was his own. At the ridge, they reached the tower. Rust covered the walls, but it still stood tall, still strong. They entered, climbed the stairs. Each step creaked under their weight. At the top, a panel, wires, a battery pack. He went to work, fingers moving fast. Valara stood beside him, watching, waiting. Finally, the screen blinked, a signal bar, weak. But there he looked at her, then pointed to the button. She placed her hand over his pressed item. Message sent, a call, a hope, then silence. The wind picked up, clouds moved, but for now they had done all they could. That night, they built a fire inside the tower. Valara sat beside him, Ilya in her lap, wrapped in both their coats. He looked at her, this time not as a guest in her life, but as something permanent. She leaned closer, rested her head against his shoulder. No words passed between them. None were needed. She took his hand, held it in both of hers, and finally spoke in her language. Soft, ancient, beautiful. He looked at her eyes, searching. What does it mean? He asked. Valara smiled. The first true smile since the day she ran into the forest. It means home, she said, and for the first time, in a world torn by fire and death, they weren't just surviving. They were beginning together, not human, not alien, just family.